tell this from looking at me or from my voice, but I'm 6'8" tall and I actually went to college on a basketball scholarship. When I graduated from college, I moved home to find a job. I was actually the first person in my family to graduate from college. And I was very lucky. I found that first job in the corporate headquarters of Wendy's International, the hamburger chain, in their marketing department. That was the good news. The bad news was I lived with my parents for the next 3.5 years as I helped my mother care for my father and my grandmother, who were both dying of different forms of cancer. After that, I actually made a major pivot in my life and became a hospital administrator. And then at 37, made another pivot and became really what I wanted to do in my life, and that was become a police officer. That was to get in law enforcement. And I did that at 37 years of age, which meant I took a whole lot more Tylenol in the police academy than my younger counterparts to get through that. After my law enforcement career, I started a school security consulting business, coached girls high school basketball. But for the last 14 years now, I've been battling a rare form of cancer, a rare form of melanoma. And then finally, my wife and I have been married for 32 years. We have one child, a daughter, who's a graduate of the United States Air Force Academy and is an officer in the new branch of the military, the Space Force. And good news, we found out she and her husband are having their first child in May of this year. So we're real excited to become grandparents. But you can find me, reach out to me, leave me a message at motivationalcheck.com.
Congratulations on becoming a grandfather. How does that feel?
Weird. Yeah, I mean, my wife and my daughter were out shopping yesterday, and my wife came home and she said, they were in the baby store looking for clothes, and she said, "Oh my gosh, our baby is now in the store looking for baby clothes for her own baby." And it's life. It's the circle of life, and we're excited. It's going to be a girl. We know that, and you just pray that the baby and our daughter are healthy. That's all you care. I mean, as long as that happens, everything else we can deal with in that. So we're very excited about this.
From a parent's perspective, the baby's having a baby, which means I have to stop viewing her as a baby and as an adult, right?
Well, and we were talking about that, about, what point does it change from being, we're the parents, you do what we say, to now we have an adult relationship with our child. We may express our opinion, but it's your choice, you and your husband, how you want to do this. And we've told her, it's like, look, we're here if you need us, but when you have the baby, we're not going to come in and smother you and do all this kind of stuff. It's important to have time for you and your husband and your child to figure out how that works. You've got a new dynamic, a new relationship, a new family, and mom and dad showing up and, oh, well, no, if you need us, we're here. You ask for it. If you don't, we're going to give you the time you need to figure out how this new family of yours works together.
Yeah, that's like the biggest difference between we're here to assist versus we're here to take over, right? The
Yeah.
helicopter grandparents.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we've said this like, hey, you want to drop her off on Monday and pick her up on Friday? Well, you go, "Hey, we'll take care of that. We'll do that, but she doesn't want to do that." So, and I don't blame her. I wouldn't either. But, when we had her, we were living in California. We had no family around. And we had about a month and a half before, my mother and my wife's mother came to help us. But it was figuring that out. How are we going to do this? What role do I play as the father? My wife was breastfeeding, so when the baby cried in the middle of the night, I couldn't get up and do anything, but my wife did. But how do I support her? You sleep when the baby sleeps and all that kind of stuff. So it was just a learning process for us, but it was so much fun just to have this little bundle of joy that now is an almost 30-year-old woman who's going to have her own child. So very excited, very, very, very grateful for where we are right now.
It is definitely a different perspective because, as you mentioned, you know what you went through as a parent, and now you're seeing what the product of your parenting style creating their own life and having this as well. And it is such a magnificent time because you begin to see all of your hard work paying off, and you're like, yes, all I wanted was to see my family happy, to see them blessed, and now she is happy and she's blessed, and now she's creating her own blessings to put out into the world. And then you see generation after generation after generation. When you look at it from a perspective that this is an extension of Terry continuing on in the world, how does that feel?
It feels great. I mean, I was thinking back on the first year of her life. I was applying to be a police officer. So, I would go to certain events and things that I had to do, taking the test, the psychological, the physical fitness, all that stuff. But for the most part, for that first year, I was home with her. And I was, my wife was the primary breadwinner, and so she would go to work, and I would stay home, and I loved it, Terrain. I loved it so much. It was just, we would just play, and she would look at me, and her first words were, Dada. And I remember her when she first stood up. She reached for an ottoman and used that to brace herself to stand up, and I was there for that. And when I got to be a police officer, every night I worked the night shift. So after dinner, I would give her a bath and then I would put her to bed and we would read. And my dad had a book. It was the complete Sherlock Holmes book. It was like 1,300 pages from Sir Arthur Conan Doyle was the author. And every night, I'd put her to bed and I'd read to her. And I know she didn't understand most of it, but it was, she to this day remembers that. And I have given her that book. And she's like, yeah, when I put my daughter to bed, I'm going to read her Sherlock Holmes too. So, just some of the things that we did when we were growing or when she was growing up, when we were kind of, growing as a family, now she's going to take those and do it with her child. So it's very special feeling, and we're over the moon about it. I mean, we couldn't be happier.
When it comes to children, what role do you think they play in the parents or the two people involved finding their purpose in life?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen a lot of people do what I call check the box. It's like, okay, I went to college, I got a college degree, check the box. I got married, check the box. I had kids, check the box. I think being responsible for another life is the most important. I love being a cop, but it was more important for me, and I loved more than being a cop, being a dad, being a husband, and showing that, being there for our daughter. And I made, and I may have told you this before when we spoke. I made the decision that I was never going to let my job interfere with being a dad. And there were several times where, she would have a school function and I had worked all night. And so, but no, I'm going to her piano recital or her play or whatever, whatever she was doing at school, dad's day at school, whatever it was. So there were nights, I would go out and do my job with maybe only 4 or 5 hours of sleep because I wanted to be there for my daughter. And I never missed anything. I was there. I coached her in basketball in middle school and even in high school. And it was just, it's being there. And I think parents today, they want to be their kid's friend. And I'm sorry, I don't think you can. I mean, you want to care for your child, but you're the adult in the relationship. You need to make the hard decisions. No, you're not going to that party because their parents aren't going to be there, or whatever it ends up being. You're the one that has to say no. And there were times where she would pound up the stairs and slam the door and say, "I hate you." But then you respond with, well, the reason I'm making this decision is because I love you. And that's my responsibility as a parent. And I would feel terrible if something happened to you. And as a police officer, I was on those scenes. Some kid had a party and there's 100 kids there and there's no adult supervision. And, it was a mess. It's like, no, you're not. I don't want to put you in a position where you're going to be exposed to something or something might happen that you have no control over. So being a parent is the greatest job I've ever had in my life. I think probably it goes hand in hand with being a husband. I wanted our daughter to understand what a good relationship was with my wife and I, so that she could have that kind of relationship when she got married and that. So it's setting the example. And you know this, kids are like sponges. They see everything you do, they watch everything you do. And if you've got a lot of bad habits, those kids pick those up. So, you talk about your purpose in life, and I talk about it from I thought my purpose was to be in law enforcement, but my purpose was to be a good husband and a good father.
And the boundaries come from a place of care and
Mhm.
not control. And I
Right.
think some people should understand the both because it's 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 the duty of the parents to create that boundary and then say this is why I do it. It's because I do care
Mhm.
about you. I do love you. I know you're a couple years older than me, but remember those sitcoms where I hate you, dad, I hate you, mom, but later on they're like, I understand why you did this is because you were looking out for me. And that's probably the primary job of the parent. And I would take a step forward and say that to me, the most beautiful job ever in the world is the job of a parent.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I remember when my daughter got married and, she wrote me this note. And one of the biggest things that I took from that note was, I'm marrying this man. He's just like you. And I was like, okay. You wonder something. I mean, our daughter was super. I mean, she could have given us such a hard time on so many different things. I mean, we pulled her out of high school and moved to a different city when she was just going into her senior year in high school. I mean, she could have been a pain in the neck, but she was so supportive. And it's like, look, I get it. We have to do this as a family and things like that. But to say that I married somebody who was like my father meant to me that I did it right. That she understood that, like you say, you got to make the hard calls. And you don't do it out of control. You do it out of care. You do it out of love. You do it out of support. And I think it's important, especially to talk. And there were times our daughter was a basketball player, and there were so many times where I had half of a gymnasium where I would be rebounding for her over the summer, every day. And those were so special to me, not because of her working on her game, but because of the talks that we had, the discussions we had. What do you think about this, or what are your thoughts on that, or how do you feel about this? You get an insight into your child, and you can, I think, at that point maneuver. It's like, well, did you ever think about things this way? Or did you ever think about that this way? And it was a back and forth. What do you think about this? Well, what makes you say that? Or where are you coming from on that? And I don't think we do that enough as parents. We don't ask our kids, we accuse, you screwed up, you made a mistake. Okay, I mean, it would be like my dad. If I said to my dad, I'm gonna paint my hair or dye my hair green, my dad's response would have been, then where are you gonna live? I mean, it would have been something like that. But today, a kid says, hey, I'm gonna dye my hair green. Oh, you're going to dye your hair green. Interesting. What makes you want to do that? And then you realize there's a student at school who's getting a lot of attention from their peers because they dyed their hair. So it's not that I really want to dye my hair, it's that I'm looking for more attention or I'm looking for more friends. So you got to dig in a little bit. You got to get in there a little deeper and ask those questions and try to figure out, oh, you want to dye your hair green. That's just the surface. It's what's underneath it that's making you do that. And it's just simple questions. Well, what makes you want to do that? Well, Mary at school dyed her hair purple and everybody likes her now. Oh, so you think Mary is popular because of her hair? Well, yeah, I do. So you want to be popular? Yeah, so it's a popularity thing. It's not I really want to dye my hair green. So sort of digging down in and finding those reasons. But parents don't do that. They just stay right on the surface. You're not dyeing your hair green. Where are you going to live then? That kind of like what my dad would have said back then. He didn't dig into any of that. I want to dig into that and find out the real reason why you want to do something like that.
when it comes to understanding your child under the surface, or your daughter in this case, understanding why she's doing certain things, or why children in general doing certain things, what role do you think then a father plays in their child life from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, there's this whole thing today about toxic masculinity. You can't be a man. You can't, a man was designed, to provide, to protect, to keep the family together. The woman was designed to nurture and support and all that for the but now you can't do that. And don't get me wrong, I think women can do just about everything men can do, maybe not athletically. I mean, we're bigger, we're stronger, we have bigger bone structure, we have more muscle and things like that. And I don't think it's fair to, make a man or allow a man to compete against women, who you don't have the structure that I have. But I think a lot of times men have to lose their innocence, to see really how the world works, how the world operates. I mean, I certainly saw that as a police officer in law enforcement. And, you look at families. I was listening to one of your podcasts. You were talking. I'm trying to remember what the woman's name was. Lorena Troy, if I remember. Okay, and it was about it was about her child and stuff like that, and having the child taken away and things like that. And I was thinking back as a police officer, how often did I ever take a child away from a parent? And I remember I did it twice. Once the mom was delusional, she was seeing things, she was beating the kid with the cord of an iron. And it was like, no, this is, we can't have this. We have to have it taken away. And the other one was a young woman. She was 19 years old. She had twins, and she locked her twins in her apartment, turned the oven on. They had full diapers, and she went out partying. And I'm like, no, and I got that. You're 19. You don't have the cognitive ability, to understand that, sorry, your life has changed now that you've had these two young babies. And they were crying, and the neighbors were complaining, and we couldn't find her, and we couldn't get a hold of her. Those are the only times I ever took children away. And you never did that with the understanding. I mean, it was hard to do that. It was hard to separate families. You want to keep families together. Families, I think, are the core. They're core of society. Certainly, they're the core for me. My brothers have families. My parents raised us and things like that. The family is the core, and I have a very strong faith. You look at Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. The core, the family, and things like that. So, I just think as a man, it's my responsibility to protect my family. I mean, my wife is tough as nails, my daughter is tough as nails, but it's still my responsibility to protect my family, to keep my family together. And I think that's a huge role for men. And this whole toxic masculinity crap, I think is just that. It's garbage. You need to be involved in your family's life. Both of you, the husband and the wife, or if it's a single parent, whatever it is, you need to be involved. And I know it's hard, but I think, your number one priority.
I will 1000% agree. I think putting toxic masculinity to the side, I think men are designed for the protection, for the safety, for the security. That's our role. And I know that there's a lot of men out there, and I use that in quotations because some of them haven't grown up. They're still boys. And
Mhm.
we know those types of people, right? But I'm not talking about them, nor am I talking about the ones I want to control them by control and by fear and by abuse. I'm talking about when you look at your partner, they feel safe within your arms and they feel safe outside of your arms, meaning that they know when they leave the household, they're safe and secure because of everything that you've did within the household. Where I see some people struggle is that some men, some people, even some women maybe, they want to pass that responsibility to others and neglect that. Do you see men struggling with accepting the role that they're designed to do because maybe there's other distractions?
Yeah, I do. When you were just talking there, I was thinking back when I remember when I was going to court one day. I was in uniform and I was dropping my daughter off at school. And it was the first day of school, and you're in car line, and she's a little kid, and all the kids in front of us. I mean, the teachers are almost pulling them out of the car. The kids are screaming. They're crying. They're throwing a tantrum. They don't want to leave mom or dad who's dropping them off. And when it was our daughter's turn to go up, I unbuckled the safety seat that she was in the back, and she came forward and kissed me on the cheek, said, love you, Dad. I'll see you after school, and got out. And Terrain, I cried all the way to court. I'm like, my daughter didn't throw a tantrum. She didn't get upset. She just kissed me, told me she loved me, and got out of the car and said, I'll see you. And I was telling my partner that when I got to court, and she's like, no, you don't understand. It's like, just like you said, she was secure enough in the relationship with you and your wife that she knew you'd see, she'd see you at the end of it. She didn't need to throw a tantrum. She didn't need to cry. She didn't need to yell and scream. It's okay. I know dad loves me. I know mom loves me. I know I'll see him again after school. So it was no big deal. Kiss you on the cheek, tell you I love you, and off you go to school. And I didn't think of it that way. I didn't think of my wife and I have created an environment where our daughter feels safe. And I think that's what it is. That's your responsibility. You need to create that environment where your daughter feels safe when she's with you and when she's not with you. And do we do that? And that is being involved in your kid's life. Who are your friends? I want to meet your friends. I have them over to the house. We'll have a play day. I want to know if you're in a good influence. And my wife and I used to joke, would be like, the summer was always the time to deprogram our daughter from all the bad habits that she picked up from all the kids that were during the school year. Like, no, that's not a good habit. No, we don't want you doing that and things like that. But that's what being a dad is about. It was the greatest challenge I think in my life, but it was also the greatest reward to have a young person develop into somebody that is now a good, decent, honest, productive member of society, and will pass that on, and will keep going. And yeah, there's a lot of people that just, oh, hey, mom and dad, grandparents, can you watch the kid? Can you do that? And I saw that as a police officer. I was a police officer in Cincinnati. We had a curfew, and I remember one night my partner and I picked up a 13-year-old kid. It was a Wednesday night, October school night at 3 o'clock in the morning. 13-year-old kid's out. And our policy was to take the kid home. And we took the kid home, and we felt so sorry. We had to cite the 75-year-old grandmother who was responsible for this young man because dad was in prison and mom was addicted to drugs. So there was no parent. It was grandma at 75 trying to control a 13-year-old adolescent boy. And I felt so sorry for grandma because I think she was doing the best she could. But having a mom and a dad in the relationship with a child, I think is incredibly important. If you are a single parent, I've never been a single parent, so I can't talk to it, but I can talk to what I've seen as a police officer. So many, it's usually a woman. It's the single parent. It's not the dad. And these women are doing everything they can to keep their family together, but they've got to work. Sometimes they're working two jobs. And who's supervising the kid? A lot of times nobody. So I, if you're gonna have sex and you're gonna have a kid, then you've got to take the responsibility that is entailed when that happens and not just brush it off.
It's so devastating to see physically absent parents. And I guess in a lot of ways, it's even more devastating to see emotionally absent parents. Like the parent that's in the house, but they're not involved in anything. They're just
Yeah.
there, part of the furniture. They're the leg rest. Um, and you're absolutely right when it comes to the responsibility because I look at myself, and when you mentioned the story of the grandmother, that broke my heart because my grandmother raised me,
Mhm.
and both my parents are alive and well. It was just they were doing whatever it is they're doing at that time. And when my grandmother passed away, it was like I lost a piece of myself because this was a part of me. This is someone that took me and was responsible for me when maybe those who created me weren't able to. So you're right to see a 13-year-old being taken care of a 75-year-old, that is a tough place for a grandparent to be in. But the alternative then is someone has to step up and be there. And I think sometimes we miss that children are an extension of who we are. And in a lot of ways, it's an extension of what we want to show the world. When it comes to legacy of parents, how important do you think that is when it comes to the creation of children and how they operate in the world?
Yeah, I mean, kids are like sponges. I mean, they will watch and emulate what you do and say. And I think what we leave behind is what we weave in the hearts of other people. And that's one of the truths in my book. And that's a legacy truth. It's what do you want to leave behind? Because it's not, the stuff you give your kids. It's what you weave in their hearts. It's what you hold dear. It's what you emphasize. I mean, it's kind of like, on a basketball court, when I played basketball growing up, you, what was emphasized is what you did. If you didn't emphasize it, it wasn't something you worked on and things like that. The same thing is true as a parent. What are you emphasizing? You're telling your kids, not to do drugs, but you're smoking weed every night before you go to bed, or you're taking gummies. Is it the do as I say, not as I do kind of thing? And I think that's incredibly important. And I don't think parents understand that. And I'll sort of tell on myself now. I mean, when I started in law enforcement, I picked up some very, I'll call it salty language. And my wife was the one who kind of said, hey, you want to talk that way when you're at work, that's fine. But you can't bring that home because our daughter is going to hear you saying that. And I was like, you're right. You're absolutely right. And so I stopped swearing at work and at home. It's like I don't need to, if I can't get a point across without using a four-letter word, then it's probably a point that I don't need to get across. And that. So, but it was that, it's that kind of thing. And it's, as a husband and wife, you got to look, it's like, hey, that's not good behavior. You're not modeling good behavior because your kid's going to pick it up. And like I said, today we've got a daughter who, one, wants to marry a man that she believes is similar to me and wants to do the things, keep sort of the traditions that my wife and I started. Like we always go to mass on Christmas Eve. We come home, we have pizza, and we open. I mean, one year my wife's like, "Well, how about if we have a roast? Or, I can put a roast in the crock pot. We won't have pizza." But those absolutely not. No, we always have pizza on Christmas Eve. Our daughter was so against it because it's what we've always done. It's a tradition in our family. So we have pizza every Christmas Eve. It's just something that we do. So I think it's incredibly important to just to be there, to be involved, to make the tough decisions. And like I said, kids are like sponges. They're gonna do and say the things you do and say. So be very careful with that.
It is absolutely amazing the foundation of parents when they lay it and then their children reflect that, right? Like you have traditions, you have similar upbringings. You're saying that I saw these healthy behaviors from my parents, so that's what I want in my relationship. Contrary, if you have the unhealthy behaviors seeing when you're growing up, you're to go out and search for that. And you may not know, but you know the emotional connection. To your point, the tradition. After mass, I want pizza. How about this? No, 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 no. It's because the emotions that you have identified with this tradition makes you feel good and you don't want to change it because if you change it, maybe it'll change your emotional response. You touched on one truth, and I know you have four truths and a lie. What are some of the other truths that you like to share that can help people?
Yeah. So I wrote this book called Four Truths and a Lie. And the four truths are number one, control your mind, or your mind is going to control you. The second one is embrace the pain and the difficulty that we all experience in life and use that pain and difficulty to make you stronger and more resilient. The third one I gave you, what you leave behind is what you weave in the hearts of other people. And I think that's important. I think we don't think about our legacy. What are we leaving behind? Are we leaving behind, a road of destruction and despair, or are we leaving behind a road of love and caring and compassion? And I want to leave the second. And then the fourth truth is as long as you don't quit, you can never be defeated. And when people like things in threes, ABC, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, we like things in threes. So I was really, do I want to do three truths or do I want to do four truths? And number one, two, and four were ones I already had, but I felt it was so important to think about the legacy, to think about what we leave behind. And Terrain, there's a professor, I heard this story, there's a professor at the University of Chicago, psychology professor, who does this experiment with his students. And the idea is you go out and you get on a bus and you sit down next to somebody, and in three questions, you go deep with somebody. So you sit down and, hey, how you doing? Oh, I'm fine. How are you? Question one. And I'm just making this up. Question two, what do you do for a living? Oh, I'm a doctor. Question three, have you always wanted to be a doctor? Now, it doesn't matter what they tell you. They could say, no, I grew up on a farm and I wanted to be a veterinarian, but X, Y, and Z happened. Or my mother was a doctor and she died of breast cancer at 40, so I'm honoring her memory by becoming a doctor. Whatever they tell you, they're telling you their why, their purpose, their mission in life. And, we talk about legacy. I mean, 100 years from now, nobody's going to remember I was here, and that's okay. But what I want today are those connections, those relationships with other people, because social media just allows us to stay on the surface. Oh, everything's great, everything's wonderful, look at me doing great things. And things aren't wonderful all the time. They're not great all the time. But I want those connections with other people. That is so important to me. I don't care how much money I make. I don't care, how many books I sell or any of that kind of stuff. What I want today are those deep connections with other human beings. They make me feel good, just like they made me feel good when I was raising my daughter, having a connection with my daughter, having a connection with my wife, my brothers, my mom, who's 90 years old and still alive. Those are important things to me. And if I get them from my family, great. But I also want to have them outside of the family dynamic.
Legacy is the hand that continues to reach forward and into the future, right? And I
Yeah,
and I and I and I love that because you're right. Like you wrote this book, you have this family. After everything is said and done, your impact is still going to be felt because you have the family. They're going to grow and then they're going to trickle down and continue forward. Then you have your book is going to continue to make the impact. And I became really big on legacy probably in the last year or so. Not from an arrogant point of view where I want to be the next Elon Musk or I want to be the next Denzel Washington, right? It's just I've helped so many people. And I've done that because I love to help people. I love to be of service. And you know about being of service.
sure.
So I said, I'm in control of my legacy. Am I using it to create generational health and wealth? Or is it going to be generational chaos? And I think sometimes we forget that we have the power to choose, right? So when you wrote that in A Four Truth and you mentioned something where it says embrace the pain and the difficulty, what does that mean? Or what do you want that to mean for others who are listening to it?
Yeah, I mean, I think I mean, let's face it, we shy away from pain. We don't want pain. We don't, it's difficulty, adversity. No, I don't want that. I want things to be good. But we also know the only way we're going to grow, the only way we're going to get better, the only way we're going to improve is if we step outside of those comfort zones and we do things that make us uncomfortable. And I will offer this to your audience because I do this every day of my life. Do one thing, at least one thing every day that scares you, that makes you nervous, that makes you uncomfortable, that's potentially embarrassing. It doesn't have to be a big thing, but if you do those small things every day, when the big disasters in life hit us, and they hit all of us. We lose somebody who's close to us. You talked about losing your grandmother, who was very influential in your life. You get let go from your job unexpectedly, like me. You find out you have a chronic or a terminal illness. You will be so much more resilient to handle that than those people who never step outside their comfort zone. So take that pain, take that difficulty, take that adversity, flip it inside, use it as energy, burn it as fuel to make you a stronger and more resilient individual. That's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about embracing pain. Because our mammalian brains, they're designed to keep us safe. And so they will tell you, don't do anything. It would be like if you got up this morning and said, hey, I'm going to go skydiving. Your brain would be like, Trey, wait a minute. Hey, the plane might crash or your parachute may not open. It would give you all the reasons why you shouldn't do something. But again, we know you're only going to grow if you step outside those comfort zones. So find something every day that scares you, makes you nervous, makes you uncomfortable, and do that. Like I said, it doesn't have to be a big thing. Maybe you take a cold shower after you take a shower. Oh, that's uncomfortable. I don't like that. Yeah, you don't. I want to go to the gym today. I'm tired. Get up and go to the gym. Do things that you don't want to do. It'll just make you that much stronger as a human being.
Breakthrough, right? As you mentioned, as long as you don't quit, you can never be defeated.
Yeah, yeah.
I love that quote because it pushes you outside of your comfort zone. Like you mentioned, that's where you learn. I remember in every coaching meeting I've probably been to, maybe I've seen this at my job as well, is they'll draw this circle on the board. And then they put dots in the circle and they put let's say 20 dots in the circle and maybe like 5 dots outside of the circle. And they'll say that everyone outside of the circle is learning and growing. Everyone inside of the circle is staying the same. And people are like, what do you mean? It's like, well, this is a comfort circle. Everyone inside the circle is comfortable. These are the people that are taking risk. They're not afraid to fail because when you fail, you learn. And I think some people think that the more success you have, the more you learn about yourself. Not necessarily so. Every successful person had to have fallen. You fall 5 times, you get back up six, right? Because that's the way life works. The lie. I know you gave me the four truth. What's the lie?
The lie is how we determine our self importance, our self wealth. I mean, Madison Avenue is great at this. You drive this car, you're cool. When I was growing up, it was, you smoke Marlboro cigarettes, you're cool. Well, the Marlboro man died of lung cancer because he was smoking the cigarettes. So people are telling you what it means to be successful, to be cool, to be, in the in group and things like that. And there's a great fable. I don't think this actually happened, but it's still a great story about Alexander the Great, probably one of the greatest conquerors of all times. Probably even worse than Hitler when we look at the number of people that he killed during his time when he was alive. But the story goes, the fable goes, as Alexander the Great lay dying, he calls his counselors, his advisors together, and he says, I want you to carry out my final 3 wishes. He said, my first wish is I only want my doctors to carry my coffin to the grave. My second wish is I want the road to the cemetery paved with gold and silver and precious stones. And my third wish is that I want my hands hanging outside my coffin. One of his advisors steps forward and says, excuse me, you're Alexander the Great. You're the most important, most powerful, most influential man on the face of the earth. These seem like kind of minor wishes. You could have anything you wanted. Why did you pick these 3? He said, well, number one, I want my doctors to carry my coffin to the grave because I want people to understand that no doctor cures anybody. They just help the body to cure itself. So be very cognizant of how you treat your body, what you eat, how much sleep you get, how much stress you have, all the kind of things that we know how to stay healthy. He said, secondly, I want the road to the cemetery paved with gold and silver and precious stones. He said, because I've spent my entire life accumulating wealth and power and influence, and yet none of that is going with me beyond the grave. And then he said, my third wish of keeping my hands outside the coffin, is I want people to understand I came into this world empty-handed and I leave it pretty much the same way. Terrain, you and I, we've talked about what makes us influential, what makes us important in life. It's what we give. It's not what we give or what we get. And there's a great story, and I'll end with this. There's a great story about Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers, on his television show, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, who educated so many young people, including me, on public television when I was growing up. When Fred Rogers died in 2003, his family was going through his effects and they found his wallet. And inside his wallet was a scrap piece of paper on which Mr. Rogers had written four simple words: Life is for service. What are you doing to give back? What are you doing to help other people? I promise you, if you focus on that and not how much money you get or how much, what kind of car you drive or how much money you have or what kind of house you live in, you will be so much more fulfilled, so much more successful, so much more of a person who's leaving a lasting legacy. And I love, Charles Barkley, who, in the Hall of Fame, the NBA. Barkley talked about when he came into the league and he got all this money, had millions and millions of dollars. And Julius Erving, who was kind of the elder statesman on the Philadelphia 76ers during that time, looked at Barkley and said, "What are you doing?" It's like, "How many cars do you have?" Barkley said, "5." And Dr. J, Julius Erving was like, "How many can you drive?" "You can only drive one car at a time." He's like, "I understand you want to keep two cars, in case you want, one breaks down, but get rid of that. You are a professional now. You need to start acting like a professional. This money has to last you the rest of your life. So start acting like a professional. Wear a suit to the games." And Barkley said, "My whole outlook on life changed because here's Dr. J, probably the greatest basketball player at the time, telling this young rookie, this is what a professional is. This is how you act." We don't do that. I mean, we think we've got to have money, power, and influence. And none of that goes with us after the grave. It's what you give, not what you get.
And when you make yourself of service, your purpose can easily be found because that's your purpose through it. Do you think in that story you gave about Julius Irving, Dr. J, and Charles Barkley, do you think we're missing that type of mentorship mentee aspect?
Yeah, I mean, look at professional sports. I mean, it's we're recording this on playoff Sunday. There's a bunch of playoff games in the National Football League, and you see these guys make a tackle and they get up and they do all these gyrations. Look at it. It's like, I'm sorry, you're getting paid $10 million here to make that tackle. Why are you so, it's like, look at me. I've got to be the center of attention. And that's not the case. You don't need to be the center of attention. Can't you just do your job? I made the tackle. I'm going to get up. I'm going to get ready for the next play. And that's the important. I mean, look at me. Look at all I've got. I'm important. I'm influential. Well, if you believe statistics, 80% of players in the National Football League who are millionaires are bankrupt 5 years after they get out of the league. So you're doing something wrong based on what's going on. And you look at somebody like Shaq, Shaquille O'Neal, who has taken his money and invested it in businesses and things like that, and now is like a billionaire because he was smart with the money that he got. And I know the NBA, I know the NFL, I know Major League Baseball. They all provide courses to young rookies and tell them how to manage their money, tell them how many people are going to, hey, I want a piece of this and stuff like that. But they don't seem to listen. And again, it goes back is, here in the United States with the whole NIL deal with, college players now, football players, basketball players. I got a scholarship to college. And I remember coaches would come in and tell my parents, Mr. and Mrs. Tugger, Terry's going to get an opportunity to play on a really good basketball team, and he's also going to get an education. Now, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22-year-olds, their prefrontal cortex hasn't even fully developed yet. And now they're like, how much money am I going to get to come play for you? I'm going to get $300,000. I'm going to get $6 million. I'm going to get whatever. I mean, if NFL players who are older and more mature can't handle that, what makes us think that teenagers are going to be able to handle that as well? I think we're doing our kids a disservice. And also, those kids are not graduating with a college education. So if they don't make it in the professional ranks in sports, what are they left with? I'm a high school graduate. And now I'm going to go try to find a job. And I was making $6 million as the quarterback at the University of Texas. Now I've got to find a job. Oh, we'll pay you $55,000 a year. What? Are you going to give me an apartment? Are you going to give me? No, no. It's like, you don't understand. That was then. This is now. This is the reality. How are you setting yourself up for success? And I think we're doing our kids an injustice. Again, we talked about the adults in the room. They got to make the choices. They got to make the decisions. And we're letting the teenagers in the room actually make the choices now.
When you mention sports, I've seen a lot of Hall of Fame speeches. Shaquille O'Neal's story I know very well, such as Jordan's I know, Barkley's I know well. Just because these are the sports that I love. I love watching basketball. I love playing football. I played both in high school and leagues. I didn't go as far as college and things like that, but I got far enough. And I remember a lot of these players, they had one or two people that were very impactful in their life, saying that this is a great opportunity, but don't forget this piece. And this piece was the education, was the mentorship. And I know, and this is going to make us sound so old, Terry. I know that there's like this thing between generations where those who are watching like 80s, 90s, and early 2000 sports, when they look at sports now or when they look at celebrities now, they're like, they don't listen. They're all about me, and get this. And then if you look at, let's say, some parents with their children, you see that with them as well. If you look at some people in their relationships, you see that as well. It's like, okay, I'm going to date you, Terrain, but what are you going to give me? Well, I'm going to treat you well. I'm going to respect you. I'm going to honor you. No, that's not enough. You need to be making this. You need to give me this. You need to give me that. We've reached a point where we used to hide our selfish behaviors. We don't hide it anymore. Where do you think the disconnect is when it comes to all of us understanding that we need each other and we need to move forward together versus this me mentality?
Yeah, I think it goes back to, I think those people are very insecure. You got to take care of me. You got to give me something. And I remember I sat down with my son-in-law, when he wanted to marry our daughter. And I said, we raised our daughter not to need a man, but if you're in a relationship with somebody, you're co-equals. You are working together for the betterment of each other and for the betterment of the relationships. That's what you want. But again, who are your role models? Who are the people that you are aspiring to? And we see people in sports, and I think sports, at least for me, and I think you would probably agree with this, what you can learn from being part of a team, how to be a good teammate, how to handle adversity, how to work hard, how to support other, all the things that are necessary to be successful in life, you can learn from team sports. But are you learning those lessons, or is it about winning and losing? Because I think when you break it down, and I was a huge fan of John Wooden, who was the basketball coach at UCLA back in the 70s, won all kinds of titles. And Wooden used to talk, he said, I never talk about winning or losing. I talk about what it means to be a good teammate and to be a good person and those things, because I don't care how many games we win. What I care about are my players going out after their time in college or professional sports and being good fathers, being good husbands, being good bosses, being good mentors, whatever they are. That to me as a coach, and it should be when I coach, that's what I want. I wanted my kids, when they go out, say, this program taught me this, and now I'm a better human being because of it. And I just don't think we have good role models anymore. We don't have people that, like Dr. J with Charles Barkley. I wear a suit every day to the game. And it was a conservative suit. I mean, you look at some of the things the players wear, to games and stuff like that, and you're like, you look like a clown. I'm sorry, LeBron. You've got a nice, but you've got knee socks and short socks. I mean, it's like, come on, you're LeBron James. You are the face of the league right now. And I grew up with Michael Jordan. I played against Michael Jordan in college. And it was like he had so much more class than the athletes today. And but again, I think money spoils us, I've got all this money. I hide behind my gated community, my gated house. I never go out in public. I never press the flesh. I never talk to people and stuff like that. I've just got people around me that are telling, are they the right people? Or are they just trying to get a piece of the pie as well? We don't have good role models. And that's why I think people like you and I, we care about service. I don't care how much money I make, how many books I sell. I care about making a difference in somebody's life. And I'll end with this story. When I get my infusions for my cancer, I'm sitting in the waiting room, I'm in my wheelchair, and you see somebody come in, and you can tell they're a newbie, first time there, because they're scared to death. They got that deer in headlights look. And I find a real good way to sort of break through that is just to kind of wheel over and say, "Hey, I'm Terry. How are you? What's your name?" Because now they're seen as a human being. They're not seen as a cancer patient or a number or something like that. And then I go on to tell them, look, I've been coming here for 4.5 years. These are the greatest nurses. They're going to take care of you. Everything's going to be okay. And you see that facade melt. Like, oh, somebody sees me as a human being. To me, that's one of the greatest things I can do. And it's free. It doesn't cost anything to put yourself out there and try to make a difference in somebody else's life.
One final question before you go, Terry, on that note. I want to give you three wishes. What are three things you wish people knew about being of service to others and why?
Yeah, number one, I would say the importance of love in the world. And I'm not talking about romantic love, oh, that person's attractive. I want to, I'm talking about sort of the spiritual love. By definition, I'm talking about love, willing the good of the other. That's what you want. That's what I want for you. That's what I want for you. That's what I want for you. I would put more love back into the world. I want what's good for you. The other thing I would say is I wish there was more kindness. I wish we would give each other the benefit of the doubt. Yeah, it looks like you really screwed up, but maybe instead of attacking you, I mean, one of the things when I was in law enforcement, I was on the SWAT team and I was a hostage negotiator. And we would use how and what questions. We would stay away from why questions because why questions sound accusatory. I mean, Trey, think about when you were growing up. I know when I was growing up, you do something goofy and your parents like, why did you do that? Oh, yes, I shouldn't have done that. So why sounds accusatory. We would use how and what questions to stay away from being accusatory. More kindness in the world, give people the benefit of the doubt. You don't have to prove anything to me. So love, kindness, and I guess maybe the last thing I would say, and I think I'm saying this because of the story you told about the circle and 20 dots in the circle, five outside, more courage.